Welcome to the Daily Apple. I'm your host, Kevin White. Emma Ryan and I will dive into all topics related to the science of longevity, along with some other subjects we just find of interest, with the hopes to provide useful information for everyone. This stems from my personal interest to optimize the human condition, to not just live longer, but to live better. Okay, well, welcome to the Daily Apple, and thank you all for being here. And today, I get the privilege of speaking to Emma Doyle, who is which you can introduce yourself, but you're a coach, you're a mentor, you're a keynote speaker, you're a high performance tennis coach, to name a few. And, I don't know, there's a lot more. You're author. Did I leave that out? What else we got?
TEDx talk. It's called Unleashing Female Potential. 13 minutes of your life you'll never get back, but I promise it'll be worth it.
Yeah, check that out. That was great. You did a great job. I do recommend that for sure. But, I got the privilege of meeting you lately, and I appreciate you making time today. You're doing a lot of really cool stuff and teaching people how to be good coaches. And whenever I met you and listened to one of your most recent talks, I realized that, all of us are coaches, whether we like it or not. And for what we do here in the practice, like we talked about before, I'm a coach to patients, trying to get them to make lifestyle changes to promote their longevity, health span, and lifespan. But part of that takes bringing out the best in others. And regardless of our lot in life, we come into contact with others. So I wanted to get into that with you. But before we do, I want you to tell a little bit about your history, how you got started in all this, which is a pretty cool story in itself. So anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, well, appreciate you being a podcast. I'm also run the coaching podcast, so I understand what it takes to have these conversations, and I absolutely love them. And if I go back to my earliest memory, being an entrepreneur all my life, and essentially I was running a paper round, and I realized that $7 a paper, not $7 an hour, was not a great return on investment. So one of my first part-time job was to be a tennis coach. And I remember walking off that tennis court and saying, this is the greatest job in the world. How do I do this as a career? Now, I know not everybody has that early epiphany, but I certainly did. As a 14-year-old, got to wear a tracksuit, wear my runners, be a kid, engage with childlike activities, and which really suited me. And it would be fair to say also I wasn't necessarily a great player myself when I was a junior, because I was a lot smaller than a lot of the other kids. And so my early journey really is more about the craft of coaching from a very young age, being interested in it, so much so that I got into the course of my dreams, sports coaching and administration. And I was loving it. I was playing the best tennis of my life. Now I was representing my state, but not even, again, at a national level. And then all of a sudden I got pulled into the course coordinator's office, and he said, do you want to be the best coach you could be? And I was like, yes, what have I got to do? And he asked me a question that I'll never forget. And perhaps it's a good reflection question for your listeners. And that is, he said to me, have you maximized your playing potential? So the first reflection question I even just maybe invite your audience to reflect on is, are you maximizing your potential? Is there something there that deep down in your gut that you need to address? The elephant in the room, perhaps, as it relates to our health, or as it relates to maximizing our potential. And I said, absolutely not. There's this thing in America called college tennis. And so I went on to maximize my playing potential in order to be a great coach. And then my journey then went on to representing my country 20 times as a national coach. Then I went into coaching coaches how to coach for another 10 years. And now I find myself living between Denver, Colorado and Melbourne, Australia as a corporate coach, going into companies and helping creating coaching cultures in the workplace, which I absolutely love. And I've never felt so aligned with my purpose, with what I want to do, with how I want to show up as a leader, as a coach. And coaching has been my life, and it still is today, even though there's been different iterations of it along the way. So I'll pause to check in there. Did that help give some backstory?
Yeah. So now, so you've spent a lot of time at the high level, professional level, tennis, coaching that, but now you do primarily, with businesses and corporations. optimizing their performance and coaching and developing their leaders and employees, et cetera. But you really do a good job at bringing out the best in individuals as well. But so tell us some stories about, your coaching experience and where you've seen, I've read a lot of your book here, like we talked about, and you do share a lot of stories about bring out the best in people. And we're going to talk about energy and resilience and all those things. But what are some stories of people that you've really made some changes and brought out the best in them?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think there's one story that comes to mind that summarizes everything and my biggest aha moment, which was when I felt like I could coach, say, these three people really well, but I didn't coach the other three people very well. And I'm talking about, in Australia, we're on the other side of the world. We're in Eastern Europe, for example. I've got 6 players, high performance players, and I'd only bring out the best in half of them. And as for their parents, I didn't really know how to communicate with the parents at all. I just thought they were high maintenance parents. So it would be fair to say that I was burnt out. And perhaps even people listening, you get to a point in your career, you're thinking you need a career change. And I went and studied emotional intelligence, neuro-linguistic programming, workplace and business coaching were the 3 main things that I hung up my tennis rackets for the first time ever, really, since I was a kid. And I threw myself into what I thought was going to be a brand new career. And what
Mm-hmm.
happened was the fabulous woman on my book, What Makes a Great Coach, Natalie Ashdown, whose name's on the book, she's the CEO of Open Door Coaching and a mentor, wonderful friend, colleague of mine. She made me deliver a tennis lesson on court and a business coaching session off court. And I wasn't allowed to give one directive command. So I wasn't allowed to tell the person what to do. Now, I was a teaching expert. I was a subject matter expert. So I was really confronted by her challenge. And what happened when I learnt what real coaching is, which I'll just share my definition of that, which is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. Once I realized that key distinction in that definition, and once I experienced her challenge of me, it changed my world and it catapulted me back into coaching coaches how to coach because I was like, this isn't around in education. This isn't around where you learn that, and here's my aha moment, and perhaps again, your listeners might want to reflect on this. I had to adapt who I was to bring out the best in others. So if you were kinesthetic and extrovert, I got along with you, I brought out the best in you. But if you're an auditory digital learner, or you're a visual learner, or you just needed a lot of processing, you needed time to think about it, you're more introverted, I had to understand how to adapt my communication to bring out the best in you. So that's the backstory. And then the best story I have, fast forward in chapter 2 of my life, when I was taking the Australian Junior Fed Cup or Billie Jean Cup team away. And I had, of course, as anyone can relate to this as well, any parents listening, I had 3 completely different humans. Often happens in a
Mm-hmm.
family. A parent has the same 2 parents have given birth to completely different humans. Somehow it does actually happen. And one of the girls was from far north Queensland. And I don't know if you know much about Australia, but they're very relaxed. They're very casual, laid back. And so she was almost so relaxed. She was lying down on the change of ends and she was like, Coach, she's like, I got this. You can put your notebook away. I was like, yeah, you got this. I was like, I was matching and mirroring her body language. The next girl was half Russian, half Australian. So she's like, Divide, come on. And I was like, up, down, matching and mirroring that energy. And then the last girl, she would either win 6 love 6, or who knows what. So I had to be a flat line on the change of ends, really show no emotion. If I showed much emotion, she would find that extra pressure. So I had to be quite. So at the end of the week, the running joke is I had multi-personality disorder, but life is about results, getting results, improvement. Like
Yeah.
that's what you're all about at your clinic. And we got results. We won in Malaysia and we finished 5th in Budapest in the World Championships. So, and as for the parents, again, with parents, you cannot not over communicate. I'll say that one more time. Really important message. You cannot not over communicate. So it's a bit of an NLP saying that we have, in that what I realized is it's better for me to over communicate than not communicate at all. I used to not communicate because I didn't know I thought that they were too difficult to deal with. And the more you communicate with them in a way that they can hear the message and hear the dialogue and know that you care, you're the famous, I don't even know who said it first, it was Theodore Roosevelt maybe, but people don't really care what you know until they know that you care, regardless of who said it. That is so, so true as it relates to bringing out the best in others. And that's probably one of my best stories to really emphasize the importance. If you're even a practitioner in wellness, if you're listening to this podcast, it's not about what you think the other person needs to do to better their health. It's how do you adapt your questioning skills and your curiosity so that it brings out in them the potential to be healthy, to make better lifestyle choices, etc. So that was huge for me, and it's now how I live my life. It's every time you ask me off air whether do I ever get bored of coaching or talking about coaching, and the answer to that question is no, because even this morning I met 8 brand new humans. When I was in Oklahoma with you last week, I met 30 new people where I'm having to work out, how do I adapt? How do I still have my superpowers, my energy, right? Everybody, it's the number one feedback I get. So I keep my authenticity, I keep my style. How do I adapt my tone or the way that I ask a question? At what moment do I ask the question? And how do I open up curiosity in myself and others to be fully present, listen with empathy, to bring out the best in myself and in others day in, day out? And that's not easy, because as humans, I know a couple of my favorite lines, as you know, is that everyone has a different map of the world. And quite often the map is not the territory. So you're looking at a map, but it's actually, if you look at the territory map, it's not actually what's going on for people. The classic example is, how are you? Fine.
Yeah.
And we know
Yeah.
that they're not fine. Yeah.
And that's not true communication. You talked about your favorites when people ask you the most important trait of a coach, and you mentioned that you were visiting with that one player. I'll let you, on the way to the plane, you can tell that story. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's actually the reason why I wrote the book. It's the reason why I started a podcast myself. And
Yeah.
that is, had the opportunity by chance to ask one of the greatest players in the world, Roger Federer from tennis, those of you who don't know, what makes a great coach, because he had 30 seconds between the court and the helicopter, actually, right? So he said, someone who listens. And I was like, whoa, I don't know what back then I was thinking he might say, it was 2014, and I don't know, I thought he might say something around technique or the tactics of the game, or someone who has great knowledge. Or when he said someone who listens, I was like, whoa, this is like, and I had already had this early training in listening, and then it became even more heightened around this concept of listening with empathy. And then I started with the interviewing of the podcast. It's one sports coach and one business coach every fortnight or every 2 weeks for those non-Aussies listeners. And I started asking, that's my only question that I ask of every single guest now. So Kevin, I'm gonna flip it on to you immediately in 1 to a maximum of 3 words. What do you think it makes a great wellness practitioner?
You do have to listen, because it takes real time to be able to invest in another person's life. It's not a 5-minute, 10-minute interaction. And you have to partner and you have to empower, I think, because we can provide a lot of cutting edge, forward thinking, best in class data. But if we don't know how to act in that, we act on that, we can give advice, but a lot of it is the things we do, but it's, in our treatments. But a huge part of that, I'd say 80-90% of that is the patient and their day-to-day activities and how they live their lives. So those are being some
Absolutely.
things that I'd say.
I love those
Yeah.
things because they are about the listening, the partnering, and the empowering is about them and what they're going to do. And that's coaching. That's what I learned about real business coaching. Even I think a lot of sports coaches need to adopt it a little more in relation to empowering them to choose what they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
accountable for, rather than even a health practitioner saying you have to completely change your diet, which again is terrible language. I would never use that language myself. As we know, it's more about health and building health, right? But if you're asking them to make an entire change, then, and you're telling them what to do, the odds of that succeeding, as we know, like New Year's resolutions, etc., is really second to none. It might work for 3 days, 1 week maximum. Whereas if they're being accountable, they're being empowered, they're choosing what health choices that they want to make that's going to impact them, they're more likely to do it. And I'm a huge believer. I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, Kevin, around the 1% principle. 1% might be putting your joggers, your runners. Like after this podcast, I said my only thing, I gotta get to the gym. So my runners are by the door so that I almost trip over them to make sure that I get to the gym. Right. So that's a 1% thing that I've done to help me make sure that that happens, even though I'm tired. It's been a long day. I might not feel like going. They're the little things that I think are super important. And, another story of a player I worked with once who lost a last round of qualifying match. It was a really important match, and said what happened. And basically he was making up all these other excuses. And he said, I lost because I didn't make my bed. And I was like, whoa. It came down to, his parents instilling in him, you make your bed when you get up in the morning, and that you're taking care of the little things and the little details. When he said that, I was like, that's a great example of the map is not the territory, right? So I'm a huge fan of that as it relates to health and wellness. What's that 1% thing that you can do? And if you choose it, then you'll be accountable and you'll make better choices. So, yeah.
Yeah, getting the little stuff right. And I just had this conversation with one of our clients. Let's just start with the shoes. Go buy yourself a nice pair of cool shoes, athletic or running shoes and workout shoes. And she was like, okay, I can do that. So we started with that, and then we move on. But you're right, absolutely. Having that little bag or whatever, I do that same thing. Just making it easy, where the right decision is easy. And that doesn't take too much effort. And like you said, the 1%. So
totally.
Well, the comment a little bit about, this practice, this chapter of practice of energy, and kind of what that looks like for you, and topping off your energy, like you say, and watching out for, things that drain your energy. How do you explain a little bit about that, and how you apply that in your own life, and how you explain that to clients?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd read one of the quotes because you mentioned it was one of your favorites in the book. And by the way, I definitely did not say this. Someone much smarter than me said this. But maybe a good way to kick it off is through the words of Albert Einstein, who said, everything is energy, and that is all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality that you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. And I love that because I am the daughter of a scientist. My dad used to talk to me about physics all the time. Action, reaction. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But he would talk to me about it in terms of the tennis serve, right? And then knowing that energy is one of my superpowers, it is something that I naturally have, really great energy. People always, well, how do you do it, Emma? What's your secret, right? And the one thing that I've learned over the years as it relates to the practice of energy is that it is one of our greatest resources that we all have within us. And I believe that the greatest gift that we can give is our energy to others. And we can only give that of others if we top it up ourselves. If we have the reserves and the resources to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. It is as cliche as it sounds. I fly a lot. And what do they always say? We all know it. The age-old saying, put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. So if we amass as much energy as we can, we understand how to top up our energy, what helps us do that, then we can give more of it in a way that is resourceful. And one of my best mates was a pro NBA and NBL, that's the Australian League basketballer. And he still talks about sleep. he still talks about, you
Yeah.
can do ice baths, you can do all those different recoveries, stick yourself in a laser sauna, but getting around 7-8 hours sleep a night is one of the most underrated topics going around in health, because that alone will give you your energy back. And I know that that's not always possible. You've got family, you've got different obligations. So if you've only did get 3 hours sleep, how can you find space to top it up? Okay, so that's one thing that I think is important as it relates to energy. The other thing with energy that I maybe buck the trend here or don't believe in is in work-life balance. So I reframe that
Mm-hmm.
and I call it life work integration. So
Mm-hmm.
I treat my life, and this is something maybe your listeners might want to reflect on, as a periodized plan, as I would for an athlete. So if I'm, let's just say, at the highest level of my sport, and I have coached it at a Grand Slam level, we want to peak for the 4 Grand Slams. So there are 4 periods where we want to peak. Same in life. In life, there might be some really busy periods. We're all heading into December. We've got Thanksgiving, we've got Christmas, right? It's a busy, busy time. So that's one of the peaks. So your energy is going to be more exposed. And therefore, the importance there of understanding that when you have downtime to recuperate, to get your energy back so that you can have life work integration.
Mm-hmm.
Because work-life balance, I don't believe exists. I don't think I've met anyone that's cracked the code, unless maybe they're retired. But and then it's not even any work, is it? So there's something in that where people might need to just rejig what their week looks like to make sure that you are understanding what is important to you when. When are the times in your life? What are the busy periods, especially in the workplace? What are the busy peak times where you will have to work more than 8 hours a day? And then what are the times where you can actually disconnect? And obviously in today's world, especially these younger generations coming through, we're seeing it time and time again. They're not disconnecting. They're staying on their devices. They're answering emails at all hours of the night, which is, I don't mind if that's how you want to work, as long as then maybe you
Mm-hmm.
take Fridays, you do a 4-day work week. So maybe, I know Europe has reinvented that way better than what we have in Australia and the US, in relation to what's important to you. And I think that comes back to coaching, does it? It comes back to care. The better you know your people, what's important to them, that they're home for dinner or that they can pick up the kids after school. So maybe they need to start at 6 in the morning so that they can make sure that they have the quality time when they are there with the kids, etc. Whatever that looks like, you need, as a manager, as a leader, do you know each person's story? Because that's how talent thrives in the workplace. I mean, that's a whole, maybe another podcast for another day, but talent retention, talent, how do we help talent thrive? I mean, I know no other. This has been my life, is in talent development. And so back to energy, I'd round off and land the plane, so to speak, with regards to realizing that we have 65,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those are already negative, and 90% of them you already thought about yesterday. So you're on that loop, you're on that hamster wheel. How do you get off it? You get off it by prioritizing your time, understanding what tops your energy up so that we can give it out as a gift. So I'll just check
Mm-hmm.
in there on what are your thoughts there, Kevin?
Yeah, I like how you kind of have, it's easy to fall into that default mode of negative energy. And there's this one story in the book you mentioned where a coach was the energy of, I think it was Serena Williams, I think, or something, was not doing very well. And he sat down and came over, I guess there was a break, and brought a chair down and ordered a cappuccino from the umpire just to snap her out of it a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
the trajectory of thought there. That
Yeah.
was just an interesting idea, and I think that a lot of people need that, and I think myself included. Whenever I learn about all this, it's not just me coaching other people; it's just the thoughts in my head. Somebody,
Yeah.
this imaginary coach coaching me, and how we integrate that into our own lives. But I
Totally.
think that's
Yeah.
interesting. That feel,
Yeah, I was going to say that was
but
Patrick Patrick Moritoglu, who shares that story about a player. So he was Serena's coach. He was working with another player in that story.
yeah.
But That's a great pattern break question. And pattern break questions are brilliant. I used to have a boss, maybe people can relate, where he would talk. I call them war stories. He'd just be going on and on and on and on, and I would say, "Can you smell that? It smells like popcorn." And he'd be like, "What? What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Okay, back to the agenda. Can we get back on track so we actually can move forwards?" So little energy
Yeah.
hacks around that. Because the other thing I would say there, I spent a lot of time coaching people. I don't let them spend too long in reality. I think that's another energy drainer where people just get stuck in storytelling and into their reality of what's, and I get you need to offload for sure as quick as you
Hmm.
can. See if you can shift yourself into future based thinking, which is a lot of what the main message in my TEDx talk is about that. How do we shift ourselves into next time? What would you do differently? Or
Yeah.
how can I change? How can I change 1% to get a better result or to live a more healthy lifestyle? What do I need to shift and by when so that we're accountable, we're making choices that are future based rather than talking about why we keep making the same mistakes or what patterns keep showing up in our life? Because as you know, Kevin, one of my favorite sayings in the entire world is that talent is not nearly as important as execution.
Right.
That's from Roger Crawford is a motivational speaker. He's an amazing man. He's I quote him from that, but I live and breathe that comment. It's the only way I know how to be successful. It's only my parents really instilled in me, hey, if you want to do it, and remember, I wasn't a great tennis coach, but because of the great sport of tennis, I'm living the best story of my life today. And tennis was the vehicle, was just the vehicle. But your listeners have never heard of me. I wasn't number one in the world, but I've been able to coach at the highest level of my sport and represent my country, which is there's no greater
Hmm.
honor than donging on the green and gold tracksuit. So
Hmm.
I share that to say that taking action in any direction, this is the clarity paradox, is better than doing nothing at all or having an idea. Having an idea but never acting on it, you will go backwards in a hurry. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result. So taking
Hmm.
action, if I could leave, if there was one maybe through line that I'd love to leave with your audience, it is what is one action you can take as a result of investing time in listening to this podcast? What are you going to do? And who do you
Hmm.
need to become to get to where you want to go? Another one of
Hmm.
my favorite reflection questions for your audience.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into two of the questions that, I ask myself too, since I read, your book and I've listened to you talk, and I've thought about asking others. It's like, what if, and then next time, those two things to kind of lead a thought process to really make a change and kind of change that trajectory. But I think those are really powerful, just little tidbits.
Mm,
But I mean, before the other thing I want to hit on, I want to talk about is this whole idea of resilience and psychological resilience. It's so easy whenever we get down or we have people that have let themselves go and they're like, where do I start? I don't know what to do. There's this resilience, or somebody's made a huge mistake and then they go down this rabbit hole of negativity, whether they're in their starting life off in college or whatever and don't know where to go, or have made mistakes. You have a whole area on that in the book, but what's your thoughts on that? I mean, what kind of tidbits or things can you give for people listening about whenever it comes to that subject?
yeah. Well, let me go back to my favorite sport of tennis, where I've spent chapter one of my life, of course. So I think it was I think the year was 2018. It could have been 2016, but anyway, Roger Federer and Serena Williams both finished number one in the world. And during
Mhm.
that year, they won a ridiculous number of matches to finish number one in the world. It was around 80%. So they're winning 80% of their matches. So I'm going to ask you, Kevin, how many points out of 100% do you think they lost? So how many? So they won all these matches as 80% of the matches, and and then if you add up every single point, that's thousands and thousands of points. But out of a percentage of 100, How many did they lose?
You think not much, but because I just read the book, I know. But you
Okay.
think, surely just maybe 5% or something.
Yeah,
But I believe
that's right.
it was
45.
45%.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. So they're coming second every second point. So if we take that,
yeah,
and also just in case you have any Ted Lasso fans, my favorite scene is when he asks his striker to be like a goldfish, to have a 10-second
oh
memory.
yeah,
And if
yeah,
we take that same concept, so the way that I look at resilience is your ability to rebound. So if we think like a trampoline, being able to rebound, and the quicker you're able to rebound, such as the greatest
hmm,
players in the world, almost every second point, 45% of the time, they're actually losing the point. So if they were really down on themselves or really negative about losing
yeah,
in that moment, it can negatively impact their game. So one thing we do
hmm,
in tennis, we have a technique called a snap release technique. So if you imagine a tennis racket, you just get the butt cap, and if you press the butt cap hard as you can into the hand, you can be as negative as you want while you're doing that for 3 seconds, 5 seconds. And when you look at my hand, it makes a stop symbol. And then you yell out stop inside your head or out loud. And then you fire off your anchor, such as 3 fingers, and then you just, you're back into being present in the moment. What do I need to do on the next point? The next point. Those outside of tennis, we just use like a rubber band or one of my cool little bracelets here. We just snap it. So when you lift it up, you can be as negative as you want. Or imagine a hair tie. When you lift it up, you can be as negative as you want around your wrist, and then you snap it. You snap it down on your wrist. So it kind of hurts a little bit. Like you feel that, and you say the word stop. So this is a micro technique, a snap release technique, allowing people to release the emotions and then helping them recenter and focus on the future, return to the present, execute and deliver and repeat. So it's a micro tool, but it's a very useful tool as it relates to psychological flexibility, which is, I love sort of the research behind that in terms of helping people rebound as quick as possible. Hence the
hmm,
trampoline image versus imagine a brick wall, and you're hitting a sledgehammer against a brick wall and you're doing it over and over again and you're getting nowhere. And as it relates to the workplace, imagine the concept of a brick wall where two people are in conflict and they're just lobbing negative comments over the wall at each other, right? It
yeah,
gets nowhere. Gets you nowhere. Whereas being able to lower the wall, stay in relationships, stay present with each other, and think about more psychological flexibility. How can you understand somebody's different map of the world? Maybe just appreciate that they shared it. You don't have to agree. I'm not asking that, but just maintain that rapport with the person to be able to get an outcome, to be able to get on the same page. That way, you won't experience resiliency fatigue. I don't know if you've experienced this much with your clients, but I definitely have come across where people are like, I'm so sick of getting up, bouncing back. Like I can't do it anymore. I'm absolutely physically and emotionally exhausted because it's more of the brick wall concept versus
yeah.
the trampoline effect as it relates to mindset. So that is one thing that I think is really, really important, that we have these courageous conversations, that we don't just, shove it under the rug and hope that it won't rear its ugly head and hit us in the face like you're banging your head against a brick wall. So these concepts to me is the difference between resilience fatigue and true
Hmm,
resiliency, which is more along the lines of psychological flexibility and completely accepting where you are at. That's another thing that not many people, they're always talking about, like with resiliency, what like how to move forward. The first step to moving forward is complete acceptance, even if you have let yourself go, or certain life situations have happened to you and all of a sudden, now you've got to take care of your blood sugar or whatever it might be. You need to
hmm,
just fully accept that is your starting point, and that's okay. And if you could do that, then it's much easier then to have a vision forward. Otherwise, again, it's very hard if you haven't accepted where you're at. you'll keep repeating the same mistakes. So I'll just check in with you there on the analogies there. Did that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Just to kind of know where you're at to start that resilience process. What are some tricks you have for somebody who say has resilience fatigue? They keep coming back, they keep stepping up, they make failures happen, and they win. They win, they lose, they win, they lose. But what steps or tricks do you have dealing with that?
Yeah. So I love that we're talking about these two practices of resilience and energy. So if
Yeah.
you are experiencing resilience fatigue, first of all, ask yourself, is it because you're putting up a brick wall and not wanting to look at things that you need to address? Is it also the brick wall that you're just lobbing sort of, can I say, shit over at the other person, right? And you're not actually having these authentic conversations or courageous conversations that you know that you need to, that you know deep down in your gut that you have to have. So that's first piece of awareness. Or is it because you literally are, you do have a growth mindset, you are bouncing back, but it's overwhelming because you're having to do it on a daily, multiple times on a daily basis, then you definitely need an energy top up. So whether that's a break, a pause, get into nature, go whatever you like to do. I like to golf, I like to hike, I like to visit wineries, right? That's just my thing. So not everybody, that's not everyone's thing. I love like a hot water, right? Sit me in hot water and
Yeah.
my energy just bam, whether it's a bath or hot springs or whatever, it's my one of my favorite things to do. So know what that is for you. Make a list of those things that help you top it up. And as long as it's not the brick wall, if it is the trampoline and you're experiencing this, understand what it takes to top your energy up. And usually that means removing yourself from your environment, even taking your family away. Doesn't have to cost a lot of money as well. Nature is one of the greatest gifts. The national parks. Wow. Anywhere, Red Rocks, Utah, Grand Canyon. I mean, those I'm a big fan of. There's still so many I haven't visited, but I always say a national park pass for the year here in the States, $80. Take the
Yeah.
kids to Disneyland for the day. It's hundreds of dollars, right? So I don't
Yeah.
know. There's so many life lessons in nature to top up your energy, but find out what that is for you, because it's not the same for everybody. I don't really care what it is, as long as you got to have an awareness of what it is, so that then, and also with resiliency fatigue, sometimes people don't know that they're experiencing resilience fatigue until it's too late. So that's why
Yeah.
journaling, I'm a huge fan of journaling, huge fan of what I call a scaling question. Give yourself a mark from 1 to 10. Where's my energy at? Be aware. Is it, if it's your exhaustion scale is towards 10, if you're like a 9, 9, 9, 9, and you're 2 weeks in a row and your energy has not been able to get back to being in the center, be aware of that. And sometimes you don't even notice it yourself. So you need little tools and techniques such as those things to be able to help you with that awareness, which again, maybe that's a through line of this episode as well. I never know what the through line is going to be, Kevin, until we start chatting. But I think that's something that's coming up, isn't it? That awareness piece. So then you can take action.
Yeah, yeah, just being aware, and I'm at fault of that too. Like at the end of the day, if I come home and I'm 20%, but I don't really realize it because I haven't really checked in with myself, and then that comes out sideways, and the way I deal with my family or something comes out. I'm like, where did that come from? Oh, I have nothing left. My energy needs a top off for sure. But anyway,
Yeah,
that's
and please,
important.
yeah, for your listeners listening, Coach Ed and Kevin here, we're not saying we've got it all worked out ourselves. I listen so intently to my people all day, and I'm trying to work out different people, and I'm so present in the moment. And then, ask my partner, get home at night, and listening is a daily practice. Maybe people can
Yeah.
relate. Not easy.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, this has been great. I really, really appreciate your time. I know I hope we've covered some things that are useful for, our listeners. I do think that this is important, not only to know that we are coaching. I just really feel like after listening to you and everything, it's like we coach other people, whether we like it or not, and how we give energy and everything, how we talk to our kids, our employees and our friends. But then, reading some of this and learning from you has been great, just on how I process things myself. And we all have an internal coach, this internal voice that tells us how we're living. we're doing and everything. But I just think
Yep.
this is really valuable information. I just think it's great.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always on about discover your inner coach. The more you can be aware of what your inner voice is saying, that's the one you
Mhm.
want to be your biggest cheerleader. And it's often not. And the research
Mhm.
supports that. So the only way you can change it is to be aware of it. And when you're aware of something, then you can help reframe it. So it's talking to you in a way that is empowering, and coaching really is the answer. Obviously I'm very biased, but it is about how do you bring out the best in your own performance. That's
Mhm.
all we can do. I know no other. So thank you, Kevin, for it's been an honor and a joy talking to you about all these wonderful concepts that light up my world. So I appreciate you and everything you're doing on this show.
What do you wish? What do you want to leave everyone is with? What would you, if you had an alert on everybody's phone to say something, or you had everyone's ear for just a brief moment? What would you want to pass on to everybody?
What
I
came to
didn't. I
mind,
didn't.
it's okay. What subconsciously came to my mind was a woman who I met many years ago. She's a Scottish Buddhist monk, and she was the closing speaker at a conference. I opened the conference with energy, and she closed it with something I'll never forget. That just came to me when
Mhm.
you asked that question, because it is something that I do live and breathe by. And she said, if 2025 was the richest year of your life, what word would you choose to govern your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your decisions, and your behaviors? And she had this quote that I'll never forget. It was about every year our sole purpose is to continuously form and transform ourselves, and transform every year. So, in other words, if you think about that, every year we have an opportunity to transform, grow. How cool
Mhm.
is that? So, when you pick that word, draw it, put it up. Like one year it was, for me, it was capitalize. One year was value, and give it color, give it shape. Have it somewhere where you can see it, because it's not the richest year financially of your life. I mean, maybe that's a flow on benefit, right? And I love the question was, remember, 2025 hasn't happened yet. But on New Year's Eve, rather than making a New Year's resolution, I'd love to leave your listeners with a thought on that night, that they choose a word that can help them transform, as if 2025 has already happened. So
Mhm.
it's a subtle distinction, but that is what came up to for me. And perhaps I'm starting to percolate it. I'm percolating that question for myself right now. And ever since I met that woman, I do it every year. And I text my family on New Year's Eve and say, right, what's everyone's word for the year? Half my family think I'm crazy and the other half get into it. So again, maybe half your listeners might give it a go, and half your listeners might not take action. But that is something that just really is resonating with me right here, right now. And talent is not nearly as important as execution. So as I
Mhm.
said to you last week, as a result of investing 45, 50 minutes of your life that we will all never get back in creating this podcast and in you listening to this podcast, what are you going to do?
Mhm.
What are you going to take action on? So that would be my closing thoughts.
That's fantastic. You're a stellar human. I really appreciate your time, and
Right
that's a
back at
great
you.
thought. Yeah. Well, but yeah, everyone, thanks for listening, and this has been a great conversation. I don't know what else to say. This is great.
Yeah.
We'll catch you next time you're back in Oklahoma. Have a great trip to Australia, and
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you guys later. All right, bye
Sounds
bye.
good. Thanks for listening, everybody.